Night had come early, swallowing the plains in a vast, hungry blackness. Through the cabin's single window, faint shards of moonlight glinted off drifting snowflakes, each one a miniature tempest. The wind pressed against the door like a fist, rattling the latch and murmuring threats. Inside, the cabin's wooden walls groaned in protest, settling against the cold. A single oil lamp burned, its flame wavering in the draught. By its light stood a man, tall, broad-shouldered, his face half hidden in shadow. His name was Elias Cade, and the frontier had crowned him with scars older than the tatters of his coat. Elias had come here after the war ended, and the sickness claimed his wife and daughter. He settled in this remote corner of the territory, trading his rifle and saddle for trapper's gear and solitude. Tonight he traced the worn grooves of his rifle's stock as if the wood might whisper answers. He studied the latch on the door, unyielding. The storm rattled at the edges, but he remained still. The crackling hearth offered warmth, but his breath still came ragged, as if he carried winter deep in his chest. Then he heard it, a faint knock, soft, hesitant. It drew him out of his trance. He tightened his grip on the rifle, silent steps leaden across the rough plank floor. Another knock, a single tap, like a river pebble dropping through the night. It echoed in his bones, waking a memory that had slept since his daughter's first cry. He stood before the door, breath frozen in his lungs. Cold seeped through the wood into his spine. He waited a moment, listening. Outside, wind scoured the cabin's face. Another tap, a plea. He undid the latch, raising the bolt. The door groaned open with a sigh. Outside, the wind assaulted his face, carrying shredded snow like whispers of desolation. But behind the curtain of white stood a woman. She was slight, leaning against the doorframe. For balance, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. Her face was pale, bone-thin, eyes wide and haunted. From the angle of her head and the tautness of her dress, he could see she was with child, far along, perhaps close to the end of her term. He said nothing. He held the rifle in one hand, the other still on the door. The wind took a stray curl of her dark hair and threw it across her brow. She blinked, and when she spoke, her voice was low and shaking like correspondence in terrible weather. "Can I stay? Till morning?" He felt the words as cold steel running down his spine. They carried fear and hope, and somewhere in them, desperation. He stood silent for an instant longer, weighing the risks. He'd lived too long without strangers. He'd buried any curiosity long ago, but he could not slam the door in her face. He turned slightly and motioned with the rifle, pointing he wanted her to step inside if she dared. She stepped in, her boots crunching dryly on the wooden floor. He closed the door, bolted it behind her. Snow slipped through the gap and coiled like smoke on the floor. She shook, wadded into her shawl as though it might shield her from more than cold. He looked her over quickly, dark circles under hazel eyes, lips chapped and cracked, a dark stain at the hem of her dress. He turned and set a log on the fire. The flames flared in sudden defiance. Jeweled shadows danced across her face. She stood still, her hands clutching the fabric of her shawl, knuckles white. He raised the lamp higher, sweeping light across the room. The sparsely furnished space, a cot stuffed with straw, a small table scarred with age, 2 chairs, one broken, and a hearth. He handed her the lamp's light and gestured at the flames. She started, stepping toward them as though discovering warmth for the first time in days. He found another log behind the stove and added it. Flames flared and caught the knots in the wood. Heat spilled outward like mercy. He said, voice low, "You can stay till morning, but no more. You go with sunrise or I send you on your way." His barrel of the rifle still leaned at his side. He made it clear he was not a man to bargain with or cross. She inclined her head, silent. She moved to the hearth and dropped to her knees, as if the promise of fire carried salvation. He watched her. No plea this time. No curse. She just sat, her shawl gapping, and shook. His jaw clenched. He told himself this was no invitation, no kindness. It was survival. His survival. He had walls for a reason, hadn't he? She lifted her head. "Thank you," she whispered. The words were faint, but they landed heavy in the room, like an accusation. He made no reply. He stood by the door, boots rooted in place, watching as she tucked her shawl closer and drew in slow, ragged breaths. From the depths of him, he felt something twisting loose, something fragile. Regret, compassion, he couldn't name it. He only knew it scared him. Streetlights didn't reach here. There was no one for miles, only snow and wind and the threat of wilderness and the ache of solitude. That woman had walked into all of it, into his life, into the dark he had built around himself, and he had let her stay. She finally rose and sat in the broken chair beside the stove, her shawl falling away enough to show the curve of her belly. He'd seen pregnant women before come looking for charity or midwives, but they weren't usually this far gone. She might give birth soon. He inhaled and realized he was holding his breath. He let it out slowly, hands trembling, warm blood filling his ears. She was too far and too soon. He realized with sudden clarity that she might not make it. She might bleed out or catch the fever, or worse. He had no midwifery training. He had no wish to carry more ghosts. But he'd answered the knock. He'd watched her enter. He had choices. Watch her freeze, send her away into the storm, let sleep claim him, and hope she was dead by morning. He chose firelight, survival, companionship, even if he didn't want it. He pivoted and retrieved a thin blanket from the cot. He tossed it to her. It landed in her lap. She looked up, startled, then wrapped it around her shoulders. He crossed the room slowly, each step deliberate and unsure. He rooted around for an extra mug, found one, then filled it with weak tea, scraps of dried leaves, boiled in water he'd thawed from a jug. He set the mug on the table in front of her, then found a small crust of bread and kept it brief in bread box. He slid the plate toward her. She stared at the food, at the tears that pooled but did not fall. He stood motionless. She raised the bread, stared at it, and did not slice it. Finally, she lifted it to her lips and took a hesitant bite. The soft crunch of bread echoed like sunrise in that room. When she finished, he retreated to his cot. He'd left one chair but offered room for her. She picked up the mug and sipped. Eye contact was still too much, so she looked at the corner of the room where her reflection glimmered faintly in the window. In that moment, Elias understood something. A reflection is a lie. It offers shape, but not soul. He returned to the cot, stripped off his boots and coat. As he crawled in, he glanced at the stranger. She sat close to the fire now, knees tucked, the tea steaming between trembling hands. Her gaze drifted over the cot, then back to the fire. Her breath remained shallow, but there was no immediate panic. He thought she might fall asleep. He should, too. Tomorrow would be dawn, and then he'd ask her to leave. He closed his eyes. Not many minutes passed before he heard her whisper, "Elias." He didn't stir. She said it again, softer. "Cade." That was her first word, beyond asking to stay. When another minute passed, he opened his eyes. She'd drifted, slept, tea gone cold. She'd slept. He lay there, feeling the ache of memory. The last time he slept while someone else breathed in the same room, it had ended in fever and flesh on fire. He wished that ghost away. But there was no place for wishes here. Instead, he listened. The crackle of fire, the tink of freezing water against the walls, her even breath, and the wind. Then a shift. He smelled her more keenly, the stale cloth of her shawl, the hint of sweat, the faintest trace of something warmer in her hair. It rooted him in the dark. He no longer felt alone. That made him uneasy, and yet he would not close his eyes fully. In the morning, she would go. He would open the door and let her take her path. He could pretend this night never happened. The fire would die, the tea would freeze, and he would be left with snow and silence again. That was the plan. By the time dawn shivered in the sky, he was dozing. He dreamed of laughter he once heard, of someone calling his name. He woke to silence. The fire was low, the lamp guttered. His cot creaked as he sat. He stared at the door. He thought, it's almost dawn. She could leave now. The first light was like ash across the window. He heard no movement. He closed his eyes, telling himself to stay still. But after a moment he sat up. He saw her silhouette by the hearth. She rocked in the chair, eyes downcast, hands folded across her belly. He realized she'd stayed. She wouldn't leave. He could order her out. He could take up his rifle and force her out into the snow. But he didn't move. He felt his heart thrum with something he hadn't felt in years. Uncertainty, responsibility, unease. Finally, he did the only thing left he could do. He dressed quietly and crossed the room. He knelt by the hearth and added wood to the fire, the flames waking as though relieved. She looked up at the light. Their eyes met, hers wide, fearful, his weary, resolute. She stared at him for a long moment, as if seeing him for the first time. He offered a nod. "Stay till sunrise," he said. His voice rasped. It was no concession, it was a statement. Day was breaking. The world would begin again. She nodded back, voice caught somewhere between relief and fear. The fire crackled. The wind groaned outside, but not as loud as him, nor as loud as her. They sat in that silence together, neither speaking, both aware that nothing would ever be the same again. In the dim light before dawn, they kept watch, man and stranger, predator and prey, and something new, strangers bound by the thin thread between compassion and survival. The door remained shut. The snow drifted. The fire held steady. And as the first pale light crept in, they both knew the story was only beginning. The wind howled through the broken hush of early night, whistling like old spirits through the pine ridge beyond the cabin. Snow swirled against the windows in ghostly drafts, clawing at the seams of the log walls, but inside, the fire pulsed a slow heartbeat of warmth. Delaney sat wrapped in the borrowed quilt, her frame half silhouetted by the amber flicker. Her eyes remained fixed on the fire, but her mind wandered farther than the flames could reach. Bo moved quietly behind her, refilling the stove's iron belly with another log. Sparks rose like startled fireflies, then vanished in a breath. He said nothing, not because there was nothing to say, but because too much would come out if he started. Words could open wounds colder than any frost outside. She glanced toward him once, only briefly. The shadows across his face shifted as the fire danced. The scar on his jaw caught the light. Faint, but there. A crooked reminder of something he hadn't shared. She didn't ask. He didn't offer. Outside, a branch cracked under the weight of snow. Delaney flinched. Bo didn't move. "Just the storm pressing down," he muttered, more to the silence than to her. She nodded but clutched the quilt tighter. "Everything sounds like a warning these days." He stood there for a moment longer, then turned toward the small cupboard by the sink. 2 chipped plates, a rusting canister of salt, and a half-eaten loaf of bread sat in quiet agreement that this was a place built for one. "I wasn't heading here," Delaney said suddenly, surprising even herself. Her voice was soft but clear. "I was following the river when the wind turned. Feet went numb. I saw your chimney smoke. Figured a roof was better than a grave." Bo poured water from the kettle into a tin mug. "Most folks wouldn't have made it this far. Most folks haven't been running as long." She didn't look at him when she said it, but the weight of the words lingered, settling into the corners of the cabin like dust. Bo handed her the cup without a word, his fingers brushing hers. Her skin was cold, even so near the fire. She sipped. The warmth spread through her chest, like something remembered. "You from around these parts?" she asked. "No," he said. "Wasn't meant to be anywhere, really." Delaney tilted her head. "That sounds like the beginning of a longer story." He gave the faintest smile. "Maybe, but it's an old one. Don't tell well anymore." The fire snapped again, louder this time, and a gust of wind rattled the shutters. Delaney's gaze flicked toward the window, her hand settling on the swell of her belly. "Sometimes I think I'll give birth to a ghost," she murmured. A thing caught between nowhere and never. Bo looked at her then, really looked. There was no poetry in her voice, only bone-tired truth. "I've buried more than I've held," he said. "Ghosts come either way." Silence stretched between them, not awkward, just long, like a breath waiting to be exhaled. "What was her name?" Delaney asked. Beau turned his eyes toward the fire. Maribel. She nodded, not pressing. He didn't have a name, she said after a moment, almost too quiet to hear. The father. Beau waited. It wasn't love, she said. Wasn't hate either. Just one night of maybe. But maybe turns into a person, whether you're ready or not. Beau's jaw tightened. Some folks don't think past the night. I did. Her eyes met his, resolute despite their exhaustion. I ran when I knew what was coming. Couldn't stay. Folks already thought less of me. Didn't take much to make it worse. He didn't ask what she'd left behind. He didn't need to. The bruises on her silence told him more than her voice could. Outside, the wind changed pitch. Something in the air shifted. Less howl, more whisper. Storm's easing, Beau said, standing. Delaney didn't answer. She was staring into the fire again, her shoulders sagging with a weight he couldn't see but could feel. Beau crossed the room and opened the chest at the foot of his cot. From inside, he pulled a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. He unrolled it carefully, revealing a stack of folded baby linens, yellowed but clean, tied with a ribbon the color of worn lavender. She turned slowly. Those yours? He nodded. She made them when we thought we'd have a child. Delaney reached out and touched the fabric. Her fingers lingered. You kept them? Beau shrugged. Seemed wrong to toss away something meant for hope. They stayed like that for a moment, her fingertips against the fabric of a life that never arrived. His silence standing like a man in mourning who had forgotten how to speak grief out loud. I don't know what kind of mother I'll be, she said. No one does. She smiled faintly. That sounds like something a father would say. Beau looked down. The floor creaked as he shifted his weight. I only know what not to be. The fire dimmed slightly, casting their shadows longer, deeper. In those shadows, Delaney saw something in him that hadn't been visible before. Not softness exactly, but steadiness, and that was almost more rare. She pulled the quilt tighter and exhaled slow. The baby shifted inside her, a reminder that the world wasn't finished with her yet. You don't owe me anything, she said. I know, and I won't stay long. I know that too. She looked at him, and for the first time since knocking on his door, her expression broke. Not into tears, not into panic, but into something rawer. Trust. He nodded once and walked to the door, bolting it against the wind. Then he turned down the lantern and let the darkness come slow, leaving only the fire to paint the room in breath and memory. Outside, the snow fell quieter now. The wind, exhausted from its rage, slipped back into the trees, leaving the world hushed. And inside, the two sat with their ghosts, the fire between them, small, steady, and alive. The next morning crept in without the sun. Grey light filtered through the frost-glazed windows like a hesitant guest. Snow lay thick over the earth, softening the landscape into hush and absence. Beau rose early, stoked the fire, and boiled water for coffee, his movements precise and spare. He didn't wake Delaney. She needed the rest. She stirred eventually, the creak of the cot drawing his gaze. Her hair was a mess of curls around her face, and for a moment she looked younger, like someone who hadn't been chased by the world. He handed her a mug. She took it grateful, warming her hands before sipping. It's bitter, she said, but smiled faintly. Better than nothing. I've got chicory, he offered. No, she said. Real coffee reminds me I'm alive. The wind had died down completely. In its absence, the stillness rang loud. Beau watched her a moment. If the weather holds, the trail down the ridge will open by tomorrow. She nodded. I should go. You could wait. Another day. Maybe two. She hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the mug. You said you weren't meant to be anywhere. I wasn't, Beau said, but people change. Or maybe they get tired of being ghosts. Her lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but nothing came. Instead, she looked away, toward the narrow window, where pine limbs sagged under weight they hadn't chosen. Bo sat beside her. You remember your dreams? Delaney blinked. What? Dreams, nightmares, visions, whatever they are, you remember them? She studied him. Yes. Last night I dreamed I was in a hallway made of snow. Doors everywhere, but none would open. I could hear the baby crying on the other side of one. I kept turning the knobs, locked, everyone. Then I heard footsteps behind me, and I ran. Bo didn't react right away. I've had one dream every year since Maribel died. Same thing. I'm walking through a field full of snow, and she's sitting under a tree, holding a bundle. She's smiling, but I can't see the baby. I always try to run toward her, but my legs won't move, like the earth's holding me down. What does it mean? Delaney asked. He shrugged. Regret, probably. Or something I never had the courage to face. They sat in silence again, the fire popping low beside them. She touched her belly absently. I think the baby knows I'm scared. Is that stupid? Bo shook his head. Fear's honest. Kids can smell honesty before they breathe air. She exhaled, long and slow. I don't know where I'll go, what I'll do. I didn't plan past surviving the winter. There's a settlement 2 valleys east, he said. Elm Rook, quiet place. Some church folks, some not. They don't ask much. She turned toward him. You think they'd take me in? They took me. Her eyebrows lifted. But you don't live there. No, he said. But when I came down from the worst of it, they fed me, let me work, didn't press. He didn't say what the worst had been, but she didn't need him to. I could go with you, he offered, then added quickly, just far as the road. Then you decide. Delaney bit her lip. What if I asked you to come farther? Bo looked into the fire. Depends what you're asking me to be. She considered that for a long time, then smiled, slow and small. Maybe just a shadow that doesn't vanish when the light comes back. They ate together. A can of beans, some boiled rice. She asked him what he used to do before all this, and he told her about working freight lines in the Dakotas, about building fire towers during drought season, about a barn he tried to fix up once that collapsed anyway. She listened, not just politely, but fully, like she wanted to hear what kind of man he'd been before the world carved him hollow. When they finished eating, Bo gathered his gear with quiet efficiency. A rope, a small hatchet, dried meat, a map rolled into a tin case. He helped her layer on a spare coat of his, too wide in the shoulders, but warm. Outside, the day had settled into brittle cold. The snow crunched beneath their boots like old parchment. Pines loomed above them, dark and watchful. The path down the ridge would take them 5 miles east, then split, one road toward the settlement, the other toward what Bo called nowhere. They walked slowly, Delaney's pace careful, her hands gloved but trembling slightly. The air carried no sound but their footsteps and the occasional creak of snow-laden limbs. They spoke little. Words felt too heavy out here. At midday, they rested near a frozen creek. Bo built a small fire, and they ate some jerky in silence. Delaney turned to him. Did she die in the cabin? Bo didn't pretend not to know who she meant. No, she left before she died. She leave you? No, he said. She left life. Cancer. Quiet. But cruel. She smiled until the end. Delaney nodded. You don't smile much. Bo looked at her, his breath fogging between them. You're right. She leaned back against a tree, eyes closed. If it's a girl, I'll name her after my grandmother, Ruth. Not much of a name now, but it meant something then. He tilted his head. It still does. Bo, she said suddenly. Is that short for something? He grinned slightly. Beauregard, don't say it out loud. I hate it. She laughed, the first time she had sinned. So she arrived. Beauregard, that's rich. It's a curse, he said. My mother had a sense of humor. The wind rose gently, brushing snow off the tree limbs in soft flurries. He watched her laugh fade into thought. You can't stay a ghost forever, she said. One way or another, you have to come back to the world. I'm trying, he said. She stood slowly, brushing snow from her legs. Then maybe we try together. They resumed the trail side by side now. By the time the roofs of Elm Rook peeked over the horizon, wood smoke curling into pale sky, Delaney slowed. Her hand reached for his, tentative. He didn't flinch. Instead, he took it gently, steady as mountain stone. As they crested the final rise, the church bell rang far off, distant, solemn, but not mournful. Below, the settlement stirred with small life. Children chasing a dog in the snow, an old man chopping wood, a woman hanging damp clothes that had no hope of drying today. Delaney inhaled. This place looks like it still believes in things. Bo squeezed her hand. Sometimes it helps to stand where faith once stood, even if you don't feel it yet. They didn't rush the descent. At the edge of the village, a woman stepped from one of the porches. She wore a wool shawl and carried something steaming in a mug. She saw them and smiled. Delaney looked at Bo. How do you know when something new has begun? He considered. When you stop counting what you've lost and start noticing what you've kept. They entered the village together, not as strangers, not quite as companions, but something in between. Two people walking out of winter, carrying firelight and ghosts in equal measure. And for the first time in what felt like years, Bo didn't feel like turning back. Bo Thatcher had seen a woman in labor only once before, and even then he hadn't stayed long. That was a long time ago, his sister in Missouri, a TD, time before blood and regret filled every corner of his mind. But now he watched Delaney curled on the floor beside the hearth, her breaths shallow and uneven, her face pale beneath the flickering orange light. Her hands clawed at the quilt, not out of cold, but pain, real, raw, unstoppable pain. He moved without a word, tossing more wood into the stove. Sparks spit out, the fire flaring higher like it too knew the urgency in the room. She didn't cry out. She bit her lip until it split. Her eyes were unfocused, watery. Bo knelt beside her, unsure what to do, unsure if his presence was helping or making it worse. I think it's coming, Delaney whispered through clenched teeth. Her voice was ragged, a dry reed snapping in the wind. Bo nodded. He reached for the bundle Mrs. Purnell had left by the door, towels, clean cloths, and a small flask of something sharp-smelling. He had no business playing midwife, but there was no one else, not tonight. Not with snow burying the cabin and the nearest soul 3 miles off in either direction. He laid the towels out near the stove where the warmth was strongest and helped her shift, careful to support her back. She cried out then, a short, strained sound that stabbed through the cabin like a rifle shot. You're doing fine, he said, voice low and steady, even if his hands trembled. Delaney's eyes locked on his. I don't want to die, she whispered. You're not, he replied, firmer now. You hear me? You're not. But part of him wasn't sure. She looked too fragile, her body too small, too thin. Hunger and heartbreak had worn her down long before the baby ever started to grow. He saw it in her wrists, the hollows beneath her collarbone, but he couldn't let her see that fear in him, couldn't let it show in the way he moved, in the steadiness of his grip. She screamed then, her back arched, the wind howled against the windows, rattling them in their frames. Outside the trees moaned, under the weight of snow. Inside, Bo muttered words he hadn't spoken since he was a boy, half prayer, half promise. Please, let her live. Please, let this child breathe. Time collapsed into broken fragments. Boiling water, changing cloths, wiping sweat from her brow. Her grip crushed his hand more than once, and he didn't flinch. Just let her squeeze, let her hang on. And then came the moment. A sound, small and wet and impossibly alive. The baby cried. Delaney collapsed backward onto the quilt, tears streaking her cheeks. Beau stared down at the slick, red-stained child in his hands. It was a girl. Tiny, fists clenched tight, like she'd come into the world ready to fight. He wrapped her in one of the towels, cleaning her as best he could with shaking fingers. Then he handed her to Delaney. She held the baby to her chest, both arms trembling, and wept, no longer from pain, but from something older, deeper, and more sacred. Beau backed away slowly. His knees buckled when he reached the chair, and he dropped into it, elbows on his thighs, breath ragged. He stared at the floor for a long time before looking up. "You did it," he said. Delaney nodded, too exhausted to speak. Her eyes fluttered shut, her breathing even. Beau kept watch through the night. Every time the fire dropped too low, he fed it. Every time Delaney stirred, he was there. Outside, the wind quieted. Snow stopped falling, but something else had changed too, something inside him. When morning came, he stepped outside into a world washed white. Snowdrifts reached his waist, and the sun peeked over the ridgeline like a timid guest, painting the valley in gold and silver. Steam curled up from the cabin's chimney. The air was still, the kind of stillness that follows a storm's fury. Beau shoveled a path to the barn, breath puffing in the frozen air. When he returned, he found Delaney sitting up, baby in her arm, as both wrapped in the patched quilt. "She's hungry," she said softly. Beau nodded and knelt beside the wood box, pulling out what remained of the bread and slicing it with care. He set it near her, along with the peach half she hadn't eaten yesterday. Delaney looked at it for a long time before picking up the slice and holding it to her lips. "We're naming her Junior," she said. He didn't ask why. Didn't need to. "She deserves something soft," Delaney added. "Something that sounds like sunlight." Beau watched the baby's tiny mouth open and close as she sought warmth. It struck him then. This was the first life to begin in the cabin since Marble had passed. Not just a child, but a beginning. The breath of something long buried. There was a knock at the door. Beau stiffened. He rose slowly, rifle still leaning near the frame. He opened it to find no one there. Just a bundle on the porch, another stack of towels, a tin of honey, and a note folded neatly on top, written in a hard, angular script. "For the girl, for the child. She may yet do better than we did." No signature. Just a trail of footsteps leading off into the woods. Beau stared after them for a long time before carrying the bundle inside. Delaney looked up. Who was it? He shook his head. Someone who knows what it means to lose and still give. She smiled faintly and leaned back against the wall, her eyes drifting closed. Junior lay on her chest, tiny and warm, wrapped in towel and quilt, and the kind of quiet love that didn't need naming. And Beau sat beside them, no longer watching the fire like a man counting minutes until death, but as someone listening to the slow return of breath, the thawing of something once frozen solid. The days that followed fell into a rhythm too fragile to call peace. Delaney's strength returned slowly, as if her body couldn't quite believe it was safe yet. She slept often, waking only to feed Junior or eat the small meals Beau prepared from what little they had. The storm had locked them in, a white silence pressing at the windows, but inside the cabin, the warmth endured. The fire never went out. Beau took to patrolling the tree line, rifle slung over his shoulder. He never saw anyone, just crows, tracks in the snow, and once a lone wolf staring from a distance before vanishing behind a drift. He didn't believe in signs, but still, something about those golden eyes haunted him. Not menace, something sadder. Each time he returned, Junior was bigger. Only by inches, but it startled him all the same. Her fingers now grasped Delaney's thumb with surprising strength. She'd cry louder and settle quicker when held. It stirred something deep and unwelcome in him, a memory, maybe, of what he'd never had, or what he'd failed to protect. One night, as wind keened across the valley, Beau sat cleaning his rifle on the porch. He felt them before he saw them, 3 silhouettes, low against the snow, rising slow and silent from the tree line like ghosts. He didn't move, didn't reach for the gun, just watched. They stopped 20 paces out, bundled in ragged wool, faces wrapped against the cold. One raised a hand in greeting, not threat. Bo stood. "You're late," he called out. The wind almost stole the words. The man in front pulled down his scarf. It was Eli Sorn, his eyes sunken, cheek split where a scab barely clung. Behind him, 2 others, Sarah Pell and the younger Harwin boy, barely out of his teens, though already hardened by grief. The ones who had once followed him into fire. The ones who hadn't all come back. "We heard," Eli said, "about the child." Bo's jaw tightened. "You come for the girl?" "No," Eli said. "We came for you." He waited, breath steaming. "We've been watching the northern road," Eli continued. "Ain't seen movement in days. But 2 nights ago, someone lit a fire up on Cradle Hill, big one, smoke at dawn. That ain't one of ours." Bo nodded slowly. "Could be drifters, or could be what's left of Coleridge," Sarah added, her voice edged with ice, "the kind that don't come to barter." Bo exhaled. "What do you want from me?" Eli stepped forward. "If they're heading this way, we need to be ready. We've got 5 shooters, maybe 6. If you come back, we've got 7. And you've got eyes sharper than any of us." Bo looked past them, past the trees and into the shadowed hills beyond. He saw nothing, but he felt it, the tension in the wind, the air too still, too cold. "Can't leave them," Bo said. "Not asking you to," Eli replied. "Just asking you to stand with us when it counts." Bo considered this. "You'll send someone here if it turns?" Eli nodded. "Soon as we know." Bo gave a single nod in return. The 3 melted into the trees without another word. That night, Delaney woke screaming. Junior had just fallen asleep in Bo's arms, and the sudden jolt made the baby wail. Bo rushed to her side. Delaney thrashed, caught in some fevered dream. "No, please," she mumbled. "Not again, not again." He grabbed her shoulders gently. "Laney, hey, it's Bo. You're safe." Her eyes snapped open, wild with terror, until they met his. "I was back there," she whispered. "Back in the river. They were pulling me under. My sister, she didn't—" She broke off, choking on her own breath. Bo set Junior back in her cradle and sat beside Delaney, wrapping her in the quilt she'd kicked off. "You're here," he said. "She's not pulling you. You're not sinking." Delaney's breathing slowed, but her eyes didn't leave his. "You ever wonder if we're not meant to come back from some things?" He didn't answer right away. "I think about it every day," he finally said. "But then I look at her, and I see you, and I wonder if maybe we're not meant to come back the same. Maybe we come back changed." "Changed into what?" He looked toward the cradle. "Something worth keeping alive." She reached for his hand, fingers wrapping around his with surprising strength. In the days that followed, he trained her, not because he believed she'd need it, though he feared she might, but because it gave her something to hold on to. He taught her to load the small pistol he'd kept hidden in the floorboards, showed her how to aim, how to breathe before pulling the trigger. "You won't miss," he told her. "Not when it matters." She practiced each morning, cradling Junior in one arm and gripping the weapon with the other, until the baby squirmed and cried, and Delaney laughed for the first time in weeks. Then came the night of the fire. Bo saw it through the eastern trees, a glow too steady for lightning, too big for a camp. He moved fast, rifle, coat, boots. Delaney watched from the window, eyes wide. "Is it them?" He didn't answer. "Bo, if something happens—" "Don't," he said, voice sharp. "You lock the door, keep her close. You shoot if anyone comes through. Not me, not anyone." She nodded. He hesitated at the door. "If I don't come back, "You will," she said, her voice hardening, "because you owe me a full story, and I'm not letting you vanish like a ghost." Bo smiled, just barely. "Yes, ma'am." He vanished into the woods, snow crunching underfoot. He didn't go to Cradle Hill. He went south, where the fire rose higher, too close now, licking the edge of forest like a warning. He found Eli in the ravine, huddled with Sarah and two others. They looked worse for wear, blood on Eli's sleeve, soot across Sarah's cheek. "They burned Lockton's farm," Eli said without preamble. "Didn't leave nothing but ashes and bones." Bo's jaw clenched. "How many?" "6, maybe 7, not ours." "What do they want?" Sarah looked at him. "Whatever's left." Bo turned to Eli. "We cut them off in the pass, funnel them between the ridges. It's narrow. They won't know the terrain." "You think we have the time?" "We make it." That night was all motion, setting traps, mapping escape lines. Bo moved like the man he used to be, the one who knew where to shoot, where to hide, how to kill, all without blinking. But this time he didn't do it for a cause or command. He did it for a baby sleeping in a cradle by a wood stove. Dawn broke cold and blood-colored, the sky a wash of bruised red. Sarah looked at him. "Whatever's left." Bo turned to Eli. "We cut them off in the pass, funnel them between the ridges. It's narrow. They won't know the terrain." "You think we have the time?" "We make it." That night was all motion, setting traps, mapping escape lines. Bo moved like the man he used to be, the one who knew where to shoot, where to hide, how to kill without blinking. But this time he didn't do it for a cause or command. He did it for a baby sleeping in a cradle by a wood stove. Dawn broke cold and blood-colored, the sky a wash of bruised red. They struck first. The battle was short, brutal, and without mercy. By the time the sun crested the hill, 5 men lay dead in the snow, and 2 more had fled, their boots leaving erratic tracks through the trees. Bo's shoulder was grazed. Eli took a blow to the leg, but they stood, breath heavy, rifles hot. Later, Bo returned to the cabin alone. Delaney opened the door before he could knock. She took one look at him and broke into sobs, not from fear, but from the savage relief of having hope return. Junior stirred in the cradle, blinking up at the ceiling, as if aware that something had changed in the air. Bo entered and shut the door. For the first time since the world had turned dark and cold and cruel, he let himself believe they'd bought a little more time. "You came back?" Delaney whispered. He sank to the floor beside the fire, shoulder bleeding, but eyes calm. "I told you I would." Some stories end not with answers, but with choices. A man who once shut the world out found purpose in a cry for help. A woman who had no place found shelter, not just from the cold, but from judgment. And somewhere in the silence, a child was born into a world that might just be better than the one that came before. If this story stirred something in you, if the snow, the firelight, the quiet bravery of strangers meant something, leave a comment below. Let us know what stayed with you. And if you believe stories like this still matter, raw, human, hard-earned, then hit that like button, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more tales from the edge of the world. Until next time, stay warm, stay kind, and keep listening for the knock that could change everything.